Here's what we got for breakfast today. Got some apples, a little hash brown, well not hash browns, or potatoes with mushrooms. Got some carrots in there and celery and onion, as well as some garlic. A bagel with pesto spread and spinach and an egg on top. Bon appetit. Bien provecho.
My thoughts on whether I'm a Christian, not a Christian, or if it even really matters. Now that word, Christian, that can be very triggering for a lot of people, including myself. And I wanted to explain why. There's a lot of comments in almost all my videos about how if I have Jesus in my heart, then all my problems will be solved. I'm always surprised by how many comments there are. And yeah, I thought that it was very interesting that people just assumed that I didn't have Jesus in my heart. And then I started to wonder, how would anyone know if I had Jesus in my heart? And how would I know? Brought up some interesting questions. And I know a lot of people that watch this channel are Christian, and a lot are not Christian. A lot are Buddhist or Muslim, atheist. I mean, there's tons of other religions. There's animism, shamanism. There's a, and just plain being spiritual. So I know that there's a very diverse people, very diverse group of people that watch this channel. But there's an inordinate amount of talk about Christianity. And I'm grateful for those comments, because it's really helped bring that part of my life back into the spotlight of my consciousness. And I wanted to share the stories about that with you. And I think these stories would be helpful for, I think it'll be helpful for me. But I think it'll also be helpful for Christians and non-Christians alike. So, my story with Christianity begins with
I was born and raised here in Texas. Like I said earlier, my father is Mormon, and he followed the Mormon church and Mormonism, and that's how I was raised. I was raised Mormon up until around 12 years old. Basically when my mom and dad separated, my mom, she stopped going to the church. And personally for me, I was very naive kid, very aloof to everything, you know. I didn't understand the church and its practices. I just was kind of, forced to go and be a part of it, and I didn't really feel connected to what they were saying and doing. I was also baptized as a Mormon. I forget how old I was, maybe like 10 or 11 was when I was baptized. And yeah, it's really wild. I'm not a Mormon anymore. I never really, believed in that, and I didn't really feel connection to God and Jesus Christ. Like, for the most part, was atheist and believed that there was no such thing, and how could there be a God, and, how could he allow all these bad things to happen to me and in the world, So, yeah, I didn't believe in God for a long time, and it wasn't until, like, maybe from 2019 to 2022 where I really went through a spiritual awakening, and those were the most difficult challenging times of my life. Basically, my whole life up until recently. During those times, I was so hopeless, so desperate, so lost, so broken down, so ready to give up. I, for the first time, got down on my hands and knees and I prayed. And I prayed seriously, and I prayed to whoever was listening. And ever since then, like, I was shown, the way, and I believe I really connected to God in that moment, and that's where my spiritual journey began. I believed in a higher power and a higher purpose. I believed that there was something guiding and watching over me for sure. And prayer is a very powerful thing. I believe it's all the same, we all pray to the same God. It's, source. It's, we are the source. I actually believe that we are God, each and every one of us. We all have God within us. We are God, I am God, you are God. We are the creators of our reality. I don't really, I don't idolize anybody. So, I don't know if Jesus Christ was a real person or not, but I don't idolize him. I respect him, and I guess I believe in him. He could have existed. And if he did, that's somebody that I strive to be like and look up to. And I can't say that I have like personal connection with him, but I do know that I have personal connection with, nature, life, living things, sentient beings, down to animals and creatures that roam this earth, and the insects, the plants, and even the rocks, and the dirt. I believe that rocks hold energy and hold consciousness. Plants, animals. I like to think that we have evolved. At some point I was a bug or an animal, lower life form, I guess, low, and then when you die, you reincarnate and you move higher up, and humans are, the top of highest consciousness, expanded consciousness. And there's this book I read that explains this, and I believe in the things that this book contains. I came across this book at work. My most recent job, the job that I quit, actually. While I was in the office, my manager's office, just like taking my, and signing off for my tip money and stuff, just talking to him, you know, whatever, hang out in there sometimes. I've always been a very curious child and person, and I would look around at the stuff in there and, you know, play with the stuff, just the random crap that was in there, and look at the books and, you know, little gadgets and items. And I found this book. This is the book that I found in there, Path of Shadow. Self and Universal Completion. Yeah, and I immediately was drawn to it. This is the cover. This is the back. Light and darkness. I'm gonna read the back. Who am I? I breathe the air of Orion. I am the serpent in the grass and the falcon in the sky, both poised to strike. I am a blazing star. Before time was born, I was there. What was there was not. I was all things. In me, there was nothing that I was not. Do you know what that's like? To be all is to be nothing. For who could purge my loneliness? There is none other than I. There is no time, there is no space, there is no up or down, there was no black or white, there was no hot or cold, there was no other, there was only naught, which was I. What could save me from this eternal isolation, this frozen singularity? Only the fire of movement, of change, of multiplicity. I knew what must be done. I knew the murder I must commit. And so I reached down within my infinite depths and laid hold of that which I had once fought so hard to destroy. I found an old idea that once existed in time, an old thought, a horrible and monstrous thought. I found the corpse of that great beast, the dragon, the hydra, the shadow. And I gave a piece of myself to give it life. In an instant, it came to be, and dark fire along with it. Ah, but there was still nothing but I. Only now I was the beast as well. I felt the power rise within, a power that had gone out long ago. I became horrified and thrilled. The beast that was I spoke. Fool, shall I now save us from yourself? Shall I now wreak havoc and chaos? Shall I divide us into a multiplicity? And thus I shattered, and time and space was born. I am the beast, I am the light, and so are you. Do you remember? That is so intriguing. It was so intriguing to me. So I opened the book. This is what's written on there. Morgue. The author. So I've read this whole book, and I would read it again and again, because it really changed me and my perspective on life. This book contains a large amount of poetic phrasing and metaphorical language. To be absolutely clear, I do not condone violence or any illegal activity whatsoever. I do not condone the use of psychedelics where it is illegal to do so. Never harm yourself or others. Never engage in any illegal activity. This book is for informational purposes only. I am not a doctor or a psychiatrist. If you are suffering from addiction or any kind of disorder, seek professional help. That's the little warning. Here's what this looks like. This says, by the law of will to power, I declare this book to be a catalytic object. You proceed by your own free will. We communicate now. This book talks about so many topics. Talks about everything. It talks about how everything came to be and exactly who we are, where we are, and why we're here. It talks about topics like how this is a prison planet and how we are not our bodies. We can never actually die. The death current, mental evolution, escape velocity, controlling the death current, the source, the rules of the game, the three paths, the path of shadow, the path of intuition, the path of reason. And it goes into depth about all three. Embracing our shadow selves and fracture programs and projection, slave morality, shadow zones, sex-fearing religion, Gnostic heretics, serpent's dance, explore the unknown, varied forms of shadow, free the nipple, free the cock, free the pussy, breaking boundaries, sexual transformation, psychedelics, transitioning to hyper-awareness, the impossibility of non-existence, frequency states and hemisphere synchronization. I just flipped to this page and there's my name right here. I've always felt connected to Salvador Dali. It's an artist as well. Just wanted to share that, and Gooby is about to tell me about if he's Christian or not Christian, or if it even matters. I think, Gooby, if you're watching this, you should read this book. It's very interesting. I really recommend that everybody should read this. And, think for themselves. Anyways, that was kind of unexpected, but, I haven't told a lot of people about this book because, it's... religion can be triggering for people and can get criticized and judged and all those things, but, probably tell I don't really care what other people think about me, and I do to an extent, but as long as I'm, sharing my truth and being honest and transparent, if you don't agree with me or like me or, vibe with me, then you can walk away, look the other way, or accept me and love me for who I am, and forgive me. And acceptance and forgiveness is a very powerful thing. I believe that love is the answer. Love is the key. We are here to love each other and to explore each other and to explore this world. Yeah, I feel like we're really raising our frequency as a planet and as a species, and I hope by me, sharing this and keeping the vibration high and frequency high and keeping this mindset, I know that it's doing good in this world, and that'll stick with others and bring others up. That is what I want to do. So I'm going to continue watching this video. Check out 𝕉𝕝. His channel on YouTube is 𝕉𝕝 and and he's a really, really cool person. His name's Jonathan. His story is very inspiring and tragic, but also hopeful. Definitely has become one of my favorite channels here on YouTube. So yeah, I'm going to stop yapping now and I'm going to eat this and continue watching. Thank you for listening to that.
It's kind of, well, it might make you feel bad about being a Christian, but that's not my intent of this video. My intent of this video is to really talk about what Jesus was saying and how to live as Jesus was saying. And I highly recommend sticking around. But it's necessary to talk about some atrocities that were committed by Christians in the name of Jesus. So bear with me. And it's important to talk about these things because truth needs to be told. And horrible things that people have done need to be brought to light in order for us to accept what happened and heal from it. If you just lock it out of your memory and don't remember it and don't talk about it, nobody can heal. So we need to talk about this, both Christians and non-Christians. Christianity has been used as an instrument of power and colonialism. The first people that enter a new land to Westerners, are missionaries. They're Christians. They're there to spread religion. Those were the first people that landed in Korea, where my parents are from, and they actually set up a church. And I think it's my father's grandmother was one of the first converts to Christianity from the Korean traditional religion. Then next comes economic power. People, the Westerners come, and first they'd say, your religion that you believe in, that has helped you make sense of the world around you and nature and the land and the sea and the sky where you live, that religion is wrong, and you need to believe in this religion. And this religion tells you that that you are Lord over all of the earth, and man is supposed to rule over everything. But a lot of these places where these missionaries went, the people were believing in a religion that had many spirits and gods that were from the land and the animals and the sea and the sky, and helped people see that they were part of nature, not ruling over nature. So the first thing that happens is the missionary comes and tells the people that what you believe is wrong, and you actually need to believe in Jesus and believe that you are ruling over nature. And that creates a separation from the person and the surrounding animals, insects, plants, water, sky, land. And I'm not saying that that's what Jesus said. That's just what the missionaries I mean, it is in the Bible, but I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think Jesus said that. I think it's written in maybe the Old Testament or something. So, yeah, the missionaries will come, and then they'll tell the people to believe something different, which is that they are separate from the land and the nature, and they're supposed to rule over it. And then comes the economic power to exploit the land, because the Westerners, they come to colonize and extract resources from the land and the people. So Christianity is the first step to exploit people. Well, it has been used as the first step to exploit people. Now, those of you who are Christian, please listen. No, be patient with me and listen to. This is just facts of what has happened. Okay? And if you dispute these facts, please go read a history book or talk to someone who is an indigenous person. Christianity in America, so this country that I live in, was the people that lived here before Westerners came were Native Americans. And the Westerners wanted to take the land. And so legally, they said it was legal to confiscate the lands of Native Americans because they did not believe in Christianity. And because of that, they did not have the right to the land they lived on. Now, this was the legal justification for confiscating land from other people that looked different and believed different things. So I'm going to tell a story that is it's very hard to hear, but it needs to be told. There was a massacre at Sand Creek in Colorado. The people, the Cheyenne Indians, were living there, and this was in 1850s to 1860s. They were living there, and then there was a treaty that said, okay, you guys can have land from this river to this river, and they had a big chunk of land to live on, and the Westerners didn't really bother them. But then gold was found in the mountains, and lots of gold diggers, people looking for gold, were coming through to the mountains where these Indians lived in Colorado. And then the government struck a treaty with some of the chiefs of those Native Americans to reduce the size of the Native Americans' land to 1/13 the size that they were in the treaty in like 1951. I don't know the exact dates, but they had a treaty, and then I think it was 1951, and then like a decade later, they made a new treaty saying that the land was reduced to 1/13 the size. But it was with some of the chiefs, not all of them, and so many of the Native Americans were angry about it. That some of the chiefs spoke for everybody, and that they didn't feel that that was right. So there was fighting between Native Americans and settlers, and the U.S. Army was called to try to defend the settlers. And there was one instance where a commander named Shivington, Chivington, Shivington, led his troops to an area, an encampment of Native Americans who had turned in they had signed a peace agreement. They had signed a peace agreement, and the nearby fort told them that they need to encamp at this area called Sand Creek. And they were given an American flag and a white flag to raise so that soldiers of the United States would not attack them. And they had this commander named Shipington, who was a Methodist minister, but now a soldier, Christian, and a teacher of Christianity, led these troops to the ridge over this encampment of Native Americans who had agreed to a peace deal. And the Native Americans, there was estimated about 130 or 140 of them. About 30 men and about 110 women and children. They were encamped there, and they saw the soldiers, so they raised their American flag and white flag to signify that they were peaceful, because that's what they were told to do, for protection. And this commander, Shipington, said he wanted to wade in gore. I think that was the term used. He wanted to wade in gore. So he commanded his troops to fire upon, with cannons, the encampment, and then go down and exterminate, well, kill the Native Americans. Oh, there were more than 130 Native Americans there, because that was the death toll. So there was some people that escaped, and some people that were wounded. But the fatalities were 130 to 140, mostly women and children. So this Christian minister led his troops down from the ridge, and they slaughtered men, women, and children. They cut open a pregnant lady, and with the sword, and had her unborn child who was laying next to her. They chopped the arms of women who were begging for mercy. They took the nose and ears and fingers that had jewelry. They cut off the genitals of men and women and put them on their hats and their saddle. There were women that were so scared they tried to run and hide in the creek, and they dug a hole into the creek bank, and there were several women in there, and the soldiers went and found them and killed them all. And they scalped all of them. To scalp means what you do is you take a knife, and then you cut right here all the way around, and then you rip the hair and scalp up. So then they're just skull right here. It's a way to deface, well, usually dead people, but you could do it to a live person too. And they brought all the scalps back to town. So there were these men, these U.S. soldiers who, led by a Christian, who slaughtered these men and women and children, and mutilated them, and paraded their private parts and other parts on their garments and saddle. And they were never put in prison, because that was the culture at the time. So when that's just one example. But when I hear stories like that, I think that Christians do horrible things. I know some Christians do really good things. Like, I see my dad and his friends provide medical care for other people who are in need and otherwise couldn't get medical care. But the horrible things that some Christians have done, to me, outweighed any benefits. And the use of religion as an instrument of power also makes me not want to have anything to do with it. So that's a very painful story to hear. And I hope no one would try to deny that happened. If you want to try to deny that happened, just look in Wikipedia or Google search it, and there's many books about it. In fact, there's probably people alive who were related to some of the survivors that you could seek out and talk to. So, when someone hears a horrible story, one, they try to deny that it ever happened, or two, they try to malign the person who's telling the story, because it is threatening to them. Well, that's just one story. Now, there's two other things I wanted to talk about. I remember the last one, but I'm trying to remember the second to last one. Yeah, I remember now. So that is shocking to me, because I remember in book of Matthew, Jesus says, where he's questioned by one of the religious leaders of one of the most important commandments, and he says, two most important commandments is to love God with all your heart, and the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. And when I learned that as a kid, I always took that to mean you should love your neighbor and love yourself. But recently I was hiking with my brother-in-law and a friend near Mount Baker, and someone left a Christian pamphlet on my windshield. And I think they're a Seventh-day Adventist. It's a little booklet, and normally I look at that, normally when I see that, I'm like, oh, what a waste of time and paper and just trash that's on my windshield. But for some reason I felt drawn to just read it. Oh, I remember my second thing is because Eckhart Tolle taught me something. Eckhart Tolle, so that booklet I read because Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle, he talks about the power of now, the power of being present, and understanding who you are and accepting who you are. And he talks about Jesus's words and what Jesus taught, and what Jesus, his perspective is that Jesus was talking about how to be mindful and fully present, and that to love, in order to love, you have to be fully present and mindful. Not only to love yourself, but to love other people. And that Eckhart Tolle was saying that Jesus was teaching this, and that the heaven that he's talking about is this heaven of finding peace and love with yourself and everything around you. And that blew my mind, because I had built up such a big resistance towards thinking about anything related to Christianity. But I was learning so much from Eckhart Tolle, and he was giving me a different perspective on Jesus' words and teachings. And that I thought, well, wow, maybe what Jesus was teaching was actually really good, but it just got distorted in some way by people who wanted power over other people and the earth and nature. And so I came across that pamphlet that was left on my windshield, and I just read through it, and then I came across the greatest two commandments, which is love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And I looked at it and I'm like, well, most Christians, they don't love their neighbor as they love themselves, because they do terrible things like massacre unarmed women and children. But then I looked at it and I was like, wait a second. The second commandment says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So if you don't, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, it doesn't tell you to love yourself. So if you love yourself a little bit, then you can love your neighbor just a little bit, because you only love yourself a little bit, and you follow that second commandment. Or if you have negative love for yourself, which is hate, then you can have negative love for your neighbor, which is hate. You can hate your neighbor because you hate yourself, and you still fulfill that second commandment. So I realized that there is a disconnect between the first and second commandment. So I'm going to just say it's A, B, C, and D. So this is the end of this talk, but this is really important to me, and hopefully it might be important to somebody else. First commandment is love God with all your heart. That's A. B, we're going to skip for a second, because it goes straight to C, which is, or actually D, which is love your neighbor as you love yourself, which is C. So, love God with all your heart, and whatever you love, however you love yourself, you love your neighbor. And so, if you hate yourself, you can hate your neighbor and still fulfill this part. And loving God is somehow separated from the second part. But, and I think that that's part of the failing of how, well, it might even be a failing of what Jesus was talking about. I think he left out this middle part, loving yourself. And I'll explain more about that. I mean, he maybe was talking about that, but let me talk more about that. If you love God with all your heart, and so when you become Christian, the phrases people typically use is you accept Jesus into your heart, or God into your heart. And so Jesus and God are synonymous, essentially. When you accept Jesus and God into your heart, then God is part of you. That is the missing link here. Because if God is part of you, and you have to love God with all your heart, that means you've got to love yourself with all your heart. If you love yourself with all your heart, which is here, if you love, God is part of you, you love God with all your heart, but God is part of you, that means you have to love yourself with all your heart because God is part of you, and you have to love God with all your heart. And if you love yourself with all your heart, you have to love your neighbor with all your heart. This is the missing link right here. This part seems to be neglected for some reason. I don't know if that was Jesus's fault from his teachings, neglecting this part, or if it was an intentional or unintentional omission on the part of people who passed down all these teachings and culture to where we are now. So, if you have Jesus or God in your heart, you have to love yourself. You have to love yourself because God's in you, and you have to love your neighbor. Then you can't massacre people, because massacring people is not loving them with all your heart. You also can't tell people that what they're doing is not right and they need to change, because that's not loving people with all their heart. You can share what you believe, but you can't force people to believe what you believe, because that's not loving. Loving is accepting who they are. Loving doesn't come with a price tag. Loving doesn't say, oh, I love you as long as you do something for me. That's not love. I love you as long as you believe something. If you don't believe it, I don't love you. That's not love. You can share what you believe, and if they want to believe it too, then, well, that's fine. But expecting something in return is not love. So, being a missionary, I don't know if that really is loving. I mean, maybe, depending on how you do it. But the way it's done now, and the way it's been done for hundreds of years, I don't think is actually loving the people that they're visiting. And you know, I've been a missionary as a kid, so I can say that. So let's see, where am I going with this? Okay, so there's important things here. There is a thought that God is only in certain people, Christians. Okay, but what is God? What is God in us? And so I believe that everybody has a part of the divine in them. Our consciousness, the part of us that is our soul, is I think part of this grand consciousness of the whole universe. I think that is God. God is everything. We have consciousness. All the living creatures have consciousness. Animals, insects, birds, sea creatures, perhaps even rocks and clouds and water and mountains and the earth and stars and galaxies have consciousness too. Perhaps even outer space, the vacuum of outer space has consciousness in God. So I think God is in everything, and I want to love God with all my heart, and I think God is in everything, including myself, my neighbor, well, we're going to talk about who is a neighbor. I think God is in everyone and everything, and so I want to love myself with all my heart and love my neighbors with all my heart, because God is in everything and I want to love God with all my heart. So who is my neighbor? I think my neighbor is, well, of course, every other person on this planet. There's more than 8 billion of us now. My neighbor is also the beetle who was just sitting here looking for food while I was talking. There was a bird that came too. There are bushes with flowers on them. Those are my neighbors. There's grass. I'm sitting on rocks. I think those are my neighbors too. Now, they don't move and they don't have DNA like the beetle and the birds and the bush and the flowers and me. But I think the rocks are my neighbor too, and this mountain that's behind me and the clouds. And of course the sun. The sun's my neighbor, and I love the sun. The sun loves me too. It gives me light and energy. It gives everything here energy. It's very giving. It doesn't ask for anything in return. The sun doesn't ask for anything from us. It just gives us light and life. So the sun is my neighbor too. So I believe all those things. I believe that God is in me. God is in everything around me. Everything is my neighbor. And I want to love God. I want to love myself. I want to love my neighbors. All of them. So does that make me a Christian? Or not a Christian? Or does it even really matter?
Well, I do have some thoughts. I agree with Gooby and everything that he said. Yeah, that was intense and powerful and mind-boggling. So basically, yeah, he explained what I think too. And in this book, In this book, it talks about how religion are fractured programs. The negatives want to rule the holos, which is reality, and enslave the universe. They currently rule this world and have transformed it into a prison. They are the minds behind the rich elite. They are the old worlders. They dominate the world through the control and transmission of wealth down their family lines throughout history. They keep the masses from evolving by subjecting them to societal conditioning and the fractured programs of mainstream religions. The positives desire a world of love. They refuse to stand up to the negatives, and their teachings are used by the negatives to further enslave the masses. Christ was a positive mind that taught to turn the other cheek. The Buddha taught detachment. The Bible says, "But I tell you who hear me, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone hits you on one cheek, let him hit the other one too. If someone takes your coat, let him have your shirt as well." Luke 6:27-29. The rich elite rulers of the world and the negative minds behind them want nothing more than to spread the message of passivity and detachment. The last thing they want is for the people to rise up against them. If they spread a message that teaches you to let someone strike you without resistance, then you'll never resist when they beat you to the ground. If they teach that if someone takes your coat, let them have your shirt as well, they'll strip you of everything, including your rights. Positives think with their feelings and emotions, with no regard to logic and reason. They believe in accepting everyone in all religions, no matter what. Thus, they accept the fractured programs and slave religions that promote sexism, racism, and homophobia. They are thereby indirectly supporting them by refusing to condemn them. Albert Einstein said, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything." More talks about Hyperianism and Hyperions, evolved synthesized minds. Hyperions are synthesized and united, led by reason and wisdom. Don't accept any intolerant ideologies. Don't accept Nazis, terrorists, or religions that promote hate. They aren't positives, and they don't accept the backwards teachings of religious programs. Love is a unifying function, and hate is a separating function. You don't love something that is hateful. You don't apply a unifying function to a separating function. If you do, it will tear you apart from the inside. If you have cancer, you don't love the cancer. You take a knife and you cut it out. You don't love that which is killing you. This world is being fractured by hateful, cancerous ideologies, and they don't need love. They need to be cut out. Many mainstream religions and those who claim to be enlightened will tell you to continue to repress these dark aspects of yourself, your shadow self. Your shadow self contains all the aspects of yourself that were split off in your early years of development because they were deemed unacceptable. It contains all the elements that were deemed as negative and thus repressed into your unconscious. This means that it contains widely chaotic qualities such as intense individuality, the will to dominate and destroy, unrequited self-indulgence, and the most taboo sexual urges. But my friends, how mistaken they are. To deny the shadow is to deny a part of yourself, part of you. We are not only of the love and the light, we are both light and dark. The star and the abyss, the sun and the eclipse. It is only once you embrace that was once split off that you will become whole. Completeness will only result through the integration and merging of your light self and your dark self. Embrace the shadow. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Continuing to suppress your shadow will cause it to grow deeper and darker until it finally bursts through an uncontrolled and destructive manner. This can be illustrated by the case of a usually calm individual who is one day pushed over the edge and explodes in a fit of violent rage. Suppression will simply cause tension to build, and in one way or another, the shadow must be expressed. This can take place through destructive addictions. These dangerous habits will form because a person has not properly managed their dark urges. For example, someone whose urges have built up may begin drinking alcohol, because this allows the shadow to come to the surface for a moment. It will release tension, and the person will return to this again and again as a coping mechanism. To be clear, we are not opposed to drinking, but simply mean to illustrate that if the shadow is not properly integrated, it can result in the formation of a dangerous habit. When you keep your shadow locked up and hidden in the recesses of your consciousness, it will latch onto any behavior that lets it come to the surface for a moment. It has finally had a chance to breathe and will hold on to whatever freed it and won't let go. This shadow is a part of who you are, but if you keep it trapped in a cage and deny its existence, it will become a rabid monster. If instead you recognize that this is a part of yourself that was split off and locked away due to external responses, then you can let it out of its confines and reintegrate it into your own personality. In this way, your mind will be reunited with what was once forgotten. It will become whole again, and you will be able to channel and command the terrifying power of shadow. The shadow contains extremely powerful parts of your mind that will aid in your development. It often contains qualities such as independence, willpower, self-reliance, creativity, expression, and wild sexuality. It contains all of the elements that have been repressed, regardless of whether these traits are creative or destructive. In fact, the shadow has been called the seat of creativity. Why would you suppress life-enhancing qualities in the first place? Simply look around at the world and observe what sort of behavior it rewards and punishes. The societies in this world have developed into sick institutions of conditioning and control. While you are growing up, you're in a particularly vulnerable state, and more than at any other time in your life, you are forced to adhere to the rules of your parents and standards of society at large. They create your early developmental environment in which you have no control. As a young child, you take what your parents say to be true without much question. As an older child, you may begin to rebel, but you are in no position to remove yourself from the situation. Parents may offer their child food and shelter, but often they are also doing intense psychological harm. Prospective parents should be required to take a course in psychology before raising their children. The raising of a young and vulnerable mind is an enormous responsibility. Those who take it on should understand its importance and become properly educated to handle such a role. In your world, any imbecile is allowed to raise a child in psychologically degrading conditions. During your critical developmental stages, you will be subjected to a system of conditioning in which you are rewarded when you behave like others, when you conform to the pre-packaged mindset of the masses. This world has been built into a prison that does not allow you to take your fill of exactly what you need to progress. The old worlders suppress powerful aspects of yourself into the unconscious shadow by creating religions of fracture that give you long lists of what you cannot do. They condemn parts of who you are as sinful and morally wrong. You will be drawn back to this world, but since your progress is blocked and your desires unfulfilled, you, as an immaterial monad, will keep coming back again and again in a vicious cycle without acquiring the necessary growth to evolve, unify, and gain consciousness control over the death current. You will be trapped in this circle without learning and experiencing what you need to progress. Are you beginning to understand the gravity of the situation? Mainstream religions are nothing but fracture programs put in place by the old worlders to prevent you from realizing your power. They promise you heaven, but instead keep you chained to this hellish world they have built. The fracture programs of mainstream religion control you through a list of commandments and rules. Many of these religions absolutely condemn the exploration of your sexuality, and some of them promote turning away from sex altogether. A crucial part of your evolution and one of the most beautiful aspects of existence is condemned as wrong and sinful. These are sick and twisted institutions. They give you a long list of thou shalts and thou shalt nots. The thou shalts exist to condition you into obeying. They exist to groom you into becoming accustomed to submitting to authority without question, no matter how insane the demands. The thou shalt nots exist to keep you from experiencing that which will lead to your liberation. Well, here are a few new thou shalts. Thou shalt sin. Thou shalt dance. Thou shalt fuck. To hell with their systems of control and absurd rules. As long as you're not interfering with another person's freedom or the whole and are striving to better yourself and the collective, you should be free to live your life in the way that you so will. Consider for a moment what it would be like to be a child brought up with the conditioning of a fracture program like Christianity. From the moment you are born, you are subjected to a system of brainwashing. You are told that you are sinful and broken, a dirty failure, and that you need Jesus to become clean. You are given a long list of things that you must do and things you must not do. Of course, exploring your sexuality makes the top of the list of things you must never do. To take things even further, you are told that God can read your thoughts, so you better not think anything dirty. This is the epitome of thought control. This is what creates shame and guilt. If you aren't a good submissive worshiper, then you'll be sent to hell where you'll be burned and tortured for eternity. This is what children are taught to believe and believe. Really think for a moment about what this does to a young, impressionable child's mind. This is psychological child abuse. If you teach these damaging ideas to your child, we consider you to a child abuser. Think about all the rules they impose. The intense guilt and anxiety that it instills in people creates a monstrously dense shadow. Their urges will be repressed and hidden in their unconscious, but that doesn't mean that it vanishes. It becomes darker and blacker. These systems create intense and unconscious urges that never get satisfied, and these minds will be trapped in a deadly cycle of incarnations without progress. Give the middle finger to those old and decaying priests with their insane laws. To hell with traditional morality. Fuck those who want to keep you chained and leashed like a dog. The only time where that is acceptable is during BDSM. Get dirty and inspire others to liberate themselves. Don't bow down to this sick world that wants to keep you trapped without progress. Fuck their absurd rules and live life. Dance, drink, make music, love, fuck, and experience. Some who claim to be enlightened say to deny your physical urges. This is completely backwards. If you feel as though you have no desire for the physical, then that's another story. But be sure it's not just hidden away in your unconscious. It's time to satisfy your lust for physical experience by indulging unashamedly. Let's say that you are a starving person and you eat just a small bite of food. Will that satisfy you? Of course not. You will just be hungry for more. The same line of thought applies to your physical desires. If you indulge just a little, when your avatar dies, it will be as though you are starving and you will want more, resulting in being swept along the death current in an unconscious process of hollows reinsertion. Now imagine that the starving person goes to a buffet and eats and eats and eats. In fact, they eat so much they become sick. Are they still hungry? No. Not only are they not hungry, but the very thought of food will make them sick. You can apply this metaphor to your physical desires. Take part in your darkest desires. Make your wildest fantasies come to life. Live and experience. You should be fulfilled so that, in the death current, you no longer have an irresistible unconscious pull to the hollows, but instead you can make optimal choices for your initial conditions. Remember that your unconscious will affect you during the death process, so you must become aware of what's hidden away. You need to make your unconscious conscious, bringing your darkness to light. It's time to explore the shadow. That was a lot. A lot of it probably didn't make much sense or sound really crazy, but it makes sense to me, and yeah, it's amazing. This book is amazing. That was just little bits of pieces. It goes so much more in depth. Like, it explores everything and anything, and the reason and logic, and behind everything. Like, it's all based on logic and reason, and it's all mathematical, and it's very profound. Yeah, give it a reading. I didn't expect this day to go this way, and for me to end up creating a video like this, but it all tied together, and it all happened in this flow, and I feel like I need to share that with you and with the world, and to make myself known, and to make this book known, because I think it's important, and it's going to heal a lot of people. Make them realize, make them open up their eyes to, the reality of the world, and to what we are and who we are and our true purpose in life. Anyway, yeah, that's it. I could go on and on and on and on about this forever, but I'm probably just gonna chill for the rest of the day. So that was cool and interesting to share with you. And if you listened, thank you so much for being here and for listening. Like and subscribe to support me in this channel. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I love you so much. And I will see you later. Goodbye.